Well, welcome to another episode of Marketing Matchup. I'm Joe Anthony, your host here from Gregory FCA. I'm excited and thrilled and pumped and totally juiced for this conversation. I'll use all the adjectives today because we're making a veritable marketing matchup meetup for the first time. Andrew and Dan, hopefully you get a chance to know each other a little bit here. Never run into each other in the wild before. So we have Andrew Johnson, who's the founder of Testimonial IQ, and Dan Gilmartin, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Catchlight. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great
so
to be here,
let's do this to get started. I know both of you from the industry, you're doing interesting things at your firms. Set us up for the audience. Andrew, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background, Testimonial IQ, and what you're helping advisors solve for. And let's try to get it all in 3 minutes. See what you can do with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I stumbled into this industry when I was co-founding a firm called Dataline Advisory, which is a very fast-growing lead gen firm. Through that, I got to see the challenges advisors face when it comes to customer acquisition, client acquisition. And with the regulatory changes in the marketing rule, saw a wonderful opportunity to support them more through organic growth. And so we built Testimonial IQ, which is a reputation management platform. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about reputation management means through the course of this conversation.
Awesome. And Dan, set us up. Tell us about yourself and Catchlight.
Sure. So been with Catchlight for about 3.5 years, joined the team when we launched. Catchlight is a organic growth platform. We leverage deep insights and data to help firms accelerate their organic growth. My background is in early stage B2B SaaS, so right up the alley of Catchlight. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So I wanted the two of you together. I don't tell my guests who they're going to be paired up with, but I really thought it was important where you take two very interesting, compelling vectors of the world of wealth tech and that drive right at the issue. I think all of us have seen and heard ad nauseum now at industry conferences about organic growth and the need to prime that pump. And so I'd love for us to get in this conversation and start talking about some of those things that have got us where we are today. And I think, Dan, let's start with you. I think anytime someone hears about new technology in the advisor space, in the back of their mind, they say, well, how does this help the advisor? How does it make their life easier? But how is it also going to be technology they can use, right? And so I know you've been around the industry event circuit quite a bit, and I'd love to hear how you would explain to an advisor how Catchlight might fit into their existing workflows with marketing and so forth.
Sure. Well, I'll take two perspectives. One is for either the marketing or growth teams within that organization, and then the advisor within that organization. So first, depending on how the firm is acquiring leads into the top of the funnel, what the role we play is once those leads come in, we help firms identify who the best prospects are within that lead set. We'll look at their ICP. We may analyze their existing book of business, understand better what the attributes are of their ICP, and then apply logic against that base of prospects that they pull in. We score leads. We have some advanced modeling where we estimate income, we estimate investable assets, and things like that. So for the top of the funnel, when you're thinking about the marketer or the growth drivers within that business, we help them prioritize who that outreach is going to go to. So that helps them improve that top of funnel because they can see where those better leads are coming from and then focus on those channels to go bring in more. So with that lead set prioritized, if they're handing them off to a BDR or BDO organization, those teams now have a better prioritized list. They have more insights on who these prospects are, what their assets are, income, something we call the Catchlight score, which is a propensity model, predicts likelihood of somebody signing up for paid advice, but all the way down to personal interests and hobbies. What is Joe Anthony into? What is he interested in? So you can have a better conversation. So when that information and that lead gets to the advisor, we know a lot more about who that individual is, and that advisor can have a much more informed conversation about what the objectives, financial objectives, investment objectives of that individual are, understanding their age, life events that they may be engaging with. So it's a better perspective on how we're going to move a lead through a funnel and develop that relationship with that individual and hopefully convert them to a client.
Well, and I think what Catchlight does really blends nicely what Andrew's firm has set out to do in terms of connecting prospective clients and advisors, and also an area of validation. So, Andrew, tell us a little bit about testimonial IQ from the vantage point of how you've seized on this opportunity around, frankly, testimonials. It's something that's obviously the validation that that always helps the advisor go from lead to client, right? And so, give us a glimpse into that business.
Yeah, absolutely. And our goal is really simple, right? It's two things. It's to make sure that when a prospect is starting their journey to find an advisor, that we help make sure that that advisor is found and discovered and shown. And the second thing is that when someone finds your firm, that they like what they see and it compels them to take a meeting. And there's a couple of forces I think going on in the industry, which make that incredibly important right now, right? One is people are much more likely to work with a remote advisor. It used to be, you set up your shingle in a town and you build a community through clubs and a country club and activities, and you can kind of prospect that way. And then people refer you to their friends. But you're now competing not just against the advisors in your community, but the advisors all across the country. And so there's hundreds of thousands of advisors. And people are much more comfortable working remotely and online, which makes it more challenging to stand out. And the second, sort of related feature there is that prospects are more likely to start their search online than they are by asking a friend or family member for a referral. And that's why I think you see this huge rise in lead generation tools and the need for tools like Catchlight to help make sense of those leads. And we feel like our role is making sure that when someone is taking that sort of natural course of looking for an advisor, the first thing they do is they go to Google, maybe ChatGPT, maybe Gemini. How do you get discovered in terms of, standing out from the 300,000 other advisors that they could be looking for? And how do you make sure that they see enough information about you that they say it's worth my time going to this person's website or maybe even setting up a phone call?
Well, and I think you're hitting on something, Andrew. I mean, we've seen the rise of the importance of social proof just in general in almost every facet of our economy, never mind financial services, but particularly, financial services is adopting this. They're always a slower adopter to most things. But over the last few years specifically, the idea that whether it's a client referral or a testimonial, getting earned media publicity, things like that, that point to the fact that the advisor or the firm might be a credible place to do business. And so I think in terms of that, when you think about, the advisor and how they position themselves for growth and leveraging that social proof, at what point, I mean, Dan outlined it, said there's a couple points of entry in terms of how Catchlight might support their clients. Where does it come in? Is Testimonial IQ built for the solo advisor? Is it better implemented by a marketing team? How would you characterize that?
It- It's built for everyone, to be honest. We've got firms ranging from solo advisors up to those with, hundreds of billions in AUM and thousands of advisors and tens of thousands of clients. I always like to say that, there's a great HBR study done in the early days of Yelp, which showed that when Yelp would move into locations, smaller firms, smaller restaurants disproportionately benefited. And the theory was you don't need to look up reviews to know what you're going to get at a TGI Fridays or Ruth's Chris because it's a known quantity. But if you're going to consider trying a new hole-in-the-wall diner, you want to know before you kind of take that chance. And so I do think that there's a lot of value, particularly for the smaller firms, or at least those that don't have the maybe a household name, to taking a more proactive approach when it comes to online reputation. But the caveat there is, I think there's a lot of large firms that have a great name and reputation in the industry, and I think it's a mistake for them to think that that bleeds over outside the industry. So you could be a very large firm, you can have a wonderful marketing department, everyone in the wealth management space can know who you are, but the man or woman who just sold his plumbing business for $5 million probably doesn't. And so I think some of them kind of rely a little bit too much on their existing reputation without thinking about the need for that kind of third-party validation.
So, Dan, I want to ask you a slightly different question about implementation, something I was always curious about. And I don't want to put you in a trap here, but I was curious to see what your thought would be. There are firms that I imagine, because Catchlight is somewhat of a data play where you're looking at a bigger set of information. Can someone implement Catchlight if they're, say, spinning out and starting their own business and building their client and prospect database from scratch? Is that a universe you feel like Catchlight can be successful, or does it simply come down to getting a critical mass of leads before you could really implement that successfully?
Joe, when we launched the product in beta about 4 years ago, we worked with over 200. I'd call them SMBs, individual advisors, single shingles, if you will, and absolutely, they can find tremendous value in a platform like Catchlight. Whether you've got 50 leads, 5,000, 50,000 leads. I met with a firm yesterday. Uh, you know, tens of thousands of leads, and so it's really about leveraging that data with that asset that you do have, that prospect list, that lead list. Because if you're one advisor or you're 100 advisors, who that next phone call goes out to and what you say on the phone has to be really meaningful. You have to really connect, and so small firms still leverage the platform as much as large firms do. And the other thing I would add to it is that as much as I talk about prospecting, there's a use case that we're starting to see a lot more of our customer base putting their existing clients through the system to understand share of wallet because we predict estimated investable assets. And so I think lots of advisors will or believe that they're managing 100% of their clients' assets. Research tells us it's probably around 50%. So we knowing what assets are held away of an existing client base is pretty important. So if you've got 50 clients, if you've got 100 clients, being able to have that type of information on who those what the assets are of those individuals, I think it's really a compelling use case for really any firm, any advisor, large or small, to use the platform.
So let's go back to something I said a little bit earlier today. I think fundamentally, organic growth is obviously the tip of the tongue. It's front and center. You can talk about all the different drivers of why that might be the case. Um, but the two of you in your business are designed to help address that in different ways. So I love to, talk about different theories or ideas or what's working, what's not. The two of you obviously are spending time with CMOs, marketing leaders. What are they doing in terms of marketing that you're seeing, and when it comes into the vibes you're getting, what's working, how they see what you're doing fitting into their existing marketing efforts? Are you getting a glimpse of where marketers are spending their time and energy as you sit with them and say, okay, this is how you implement testimonial IQ or how you implement Catchlight? Andrew, do you have any context for us there?
This might be sort of an unsatisfying answer, but one thing that's been interesting to me is that I've seen a lot of firms have success with wildly different strategies. And it hasn't been one common theme. So I was talking with one yesterday who was having a tremendous amount of success running Google local service ads in particular areas. And others I've talked to said those have never worked. We shut those down. Some just love certain lead generation services. Some are purely referrals. Some have a super deep niche and they focus on building networks and centers of influence there. And I think all of those work. But I think the common thread that I have seen exist is that none of them that are growing very well have fallen into sort of the analysis paralysis trap. They've planted some seeds, they've found things that work, and they've doubled down and they've put a lot of focus, energy, money, and team resources into making sure that they're kind of continuing the momentum there.
So staying with it's a big part of the success matrix. And Dan, what are your observations in collaborating with marketing leaders to get Catchlight onboarded?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Joe. Being relatively new to this category, 3.5 years in, 3.5 years ago, talking about organic growth was, wasn't sort of totally on the periphery, but it wasn't on the top of everybody's minds. But I think today it is. And, we work with firms up and down the sort of size stack and a lot more enterprise today. And what I'm seeing is that firms are building machines, growth machines, and they're looking at every channel available, whether it's custodial referrals, whether it's paid leads, whether it's earned media. They're more and more are looking at PR and the great work that you and your firm do, Joe, to create awareness of these firms. They're doing social ads, they're doing paid ads, but what we're starting to see is leveraging the technology and leveraging data to improve every one of those channels. And then from there, what we're starting to see, some of the bigger firms, and I think some of the really sophisticated marketers are putting in certain KPIs for how they want to manage each and every one of those channels, and then they're starting to compare one channel to the next. And ultimately, it's the two main KPIs that I'm starting to see are LTV to CAC. So what's the value of this new client relative to the cost of getting that client? And in wealth, the average lifespan of a client is 18 years. LTV is through the roof, which is great. I come from a SaaS world where a 3 to 5 LTV to CAC ratio is really, really good. The other thing that we're starting to see is more marketing leaders talking about sort of an ROI or time to payback. So, how much am I spending to acquire a new customer, and how quickly am I able to pay back the cost from a revenue perspective? So, similar to LTV to CAC, but a little different. And so we're starting to see more of that mature SaaS type model KPI being applied to this industry, which I think is really interesting. It's the world I come from, and starting to see those KPIs applied to this business, I think is starting to move the needle on a lot of firms.
Well, it's interesting. You hit on something with the custodial referral networks. It triggered a thought in my mind. It wasn't on my original question list, but I think about it. I think it's relevant for this conversation. So we actually had in this podcast and earlier episodes and on stage elsewhere, the discussions come up more than once where people say, well, if you're going to participate with Smart Asset or a custodial referral program, you you need to have something like Catchlight to optimize, and you should be involved with testimonials. The idea being, if someone gets a digital lead or a third-party lead, you want to make sure that on the validation side, when they come look you up, there's things like what Andrew's firm does available to be the first checkpoint and see if they want to keep talking to you. And then the flip side is, if you're going to spend this money inheriting leads from Schwab, Smart Asset, Fidelity, wherever you might be participating, you need to make sure that you have an engine that allows you to optimize that lead flow and making sure you're staying with them. And so when I think about creating that universe, and I think maybe it was Dan as they're building these machines, I'm curious what the two of you think in terms of what does the ideal, sort of marketing tech universe look like? What components should be part of it? What should work together? Andrew, I'll give you the first stab at that one.
No, I love that. And when we were building Dataline and growing, we actually got to the point where when a firm would come to us and said they wanted to kind of participate in our platform and get leads from us, we would first talk to them about, what does your lead follow-up process look like? How do you manage leads? And we would tell a lot of firms, you're not a great fit right now, not because we don't love you and think you're a wonderful advisor, but we think you'll have a bad experience. You're going to get all these leads in, and you're not going to know how to process them well, and you're going to spend a lot of money, and you're not going to get enough back. So here's what we'd recommend, and come back to us when you're ready to do this. And I think tools like Catchlight and Testimonial IQ go a long way to helping firms get the most out of the money that they're spending on those. Everyone has these dreams. If you find a platform or system of platforms where you put $1 in, you get $2 out or $5 out, might be in this industry. And I think to make sure that you get there and make the most out of what you're spending on, whether it's paid ads or leads or anything else, having the infrastructure in place so that when that person is matched with you, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're not going to go schedule a call. They might not answer their phone. They're probably going to Google you. So do they like what they see when they Google you? Is it going to compel them to answer the phone and take that call? And then from your team's side, do you have what it takes in place to understand which leads to prioritize, and also how to follow up with those, right? What are a lot of people aren't going to answer the call. They might not respond to their email. Do you have the right tools in place to put them into a nurturing sequence so that you're top of mind, so that when they're ready to have that discussion, you're the first name that they think about?
And Dan, how would you react to that same question, the idea of that marketing universe to make all the tools successful together?
Sure. So a couple thoughts there. On the paid lead front, we hear quite often speed to lead is critical. And in paid leads, you have exclusive leads where you may be the only firm that's acquiring that lead. So it's one-on-one, or there may be multiple firms that are getting that same lead. Then it's sort of a jump ball, if you will. So speed to lead, I think, is pretty critical. I've talked to firms where they down to the minute They know, if I call this lead within the first 60 seconds, or it's going to take me 5 minutes, what the conversion rate ultimately will be on that lead. So speed to lead, super critical. Number two, I've talked to firms that they know they're going to leave a voicemail. They know that the person's not going to pick up the phone when they call, but they want that voicemail that they're going to leave be really, really informed. So, firms are leveraging Catchlight to get data to better understand who that person is. When that lead comes into their ecosystem, who is Joe Anthony? What may Joe Anthony be interested in? What does Joe's family situation look like? What might I you know, subtly pitch in a voicemail to get Joe's interest for when I call back. And I think to Andrew's point, if I were on the receiving end of that, first thing I'd do is go to the search engine and look up that firm, maybe look up that advisor, and what can I learn about them through search. And if there are testimonials out there, that's gonna help me get a more informed opinion on who that person is, who that firm is, and do I want to take a call? Do I want to call them back? But understanding speed, understanding who that prospect is, understanding that data and how to leverage that data within your workflows, to me, super critical.
You had something there, Dan. You talk about going into the search engines. When people go to ChatGPT and Perplexity and other engines as well, right? And find this information. I think um, from a validation standpoint, whether it's with Google or Chat or any one of these platforms, you want to make sure that your firm, your service shows up. And so
Mhm.
when I think about the world of AI search, one of the things I think back to what Andrew's doing, I think we've started to see, Andrew, I'm not sure if you notice this, but the testimonials, those quotes that people put out there and produce on Google reviews have a big impact in the world of AI search. Has that come up at all in terms of how firms think about leveraging testimonial IQ?
I I'd say that is often the very first question they ask in just about every single conversation. Is this going to help me get discovered in ChatGPT? And what we're seeing is reviews are actually doubly important now, and that's because reviews on Google are still the by far the most impactful thing you can do to boost your local search. And it's also boosting your site's sort of authority ranking. It's giving the signals not just to Google but to all the other AI based searches that you are a reputable business. The second thing is having that content on your website, because those, ChatGPT and Perplexity, they're not directly going to read Google reviews. Google keeps that for Gemini and its own AI search, but they are going to scan your website, and they love, 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 love seeing really structured review content that they can summarize. So what they're generally not going to do is say, here's 6 quotes from their clients. They're going to say, clients talk about the wonderful relationships and communication skills of the advisors, right? And so they're gonna try to distill and summarize that. So having a nice, healthy quantity of reviews on there, structured in a way that's easy for them to find, is a great way to make sure that you get a kind of an authentic representation of your firm's experience on those AI searches.
Yeah, and I think that, the world of AI searches continues to be a powerful place for firms to get discovered. I think they need to blend together quite a bit, honestly, the traditional Google searches versus the world of Perplexity and ChatGPT and so forth. As you look at your firm's marketing, I'm curious, and maybe Dan, you can give me an answer here. How much does that play into how you're positioning Catchlight? I just want to take a quick sort of sidestep down that path. Like, what is going on with Catchlight in terms of your efforts to make sure you're showing up in those places?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant battle. Where is the traffic going? What are folks querying, whether it's in a search or geo? What are they looking for, and how do we show up? How do we answer the question of what are the top tools for organic growth in financial services? What are the top tools for testimonials or lead generation in financial services? And we're marketing to marketers in a lot of ways, and so we have to show up. And I think it's Andrew's spot on in terms of testimonials. I think it's one of the way those engines are working now that we're starting to see is FAQs. How do you structure the content on your site in a way that those engines are looking to provide answers to those queries going through them. So that's another really important area. And I think just really staying in tune with the market and what are the challenges? What are they going to ask the engines? And how do you answer those questions? Pretty critical.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating there is that it goes back to some of the things I mentioned earlier. The idea of social proof is obviously driving that and where it shows up. When you think about helping your advisor clients grow, and you're thinking about um, whether it's on the lead side or tending the lead, and again, I think Dan, you might be on the lead management side, and Andrew at this point might be more on the tending the lead side. When you think about those parts of it, what are some of the things, best practices, where you think about the continuum of either uncovering a lead or maybe reigniting a lead, in terms of the sorts of things that firms can do well putting in front of them, and broaden the universe beyond obviously what your firm's doing? I'm curious to see what you see working. Andrew, you're nodding there for a second. What's your input on that?
Yeah, I think one, it's consistency. I think a lot of advisors, and I understand marketing is not what they want to spend their time on, right? They want to be working with clients, and I think a lot of advisors have a hope that they can pay someone to set up their website, collect 15 testimonials, have a few lead magnets on it, and then they're kind of like, "Oof, okay, great, I'm done with marketing. I can go back to doing my actual job." And what we see consistently is that the firms who are very, very successful through organic growth, is that's not the way they view marketing, right? They view it as a continuous investment that's constantly evolving, right? And we talked about how do you optimize for ChatGPT. One of the things, and I don't know if this is perfect, but we started to try to do is we just take notes, and every conversation the prospect has with us, what are they asking us? And how do we take that information and put it on our website in a way that matches what prospects are searching for? And so, kind of viewing this as an iterative cycle to constantly evolve your firm and your marketing and your positioning for how your ideal clients are looking for you is what we see the successful ones doing.
All right, Dan. So you heard Andrew's answer talking a little bit about that whole continuum there. What would be your thoughts in terms of making sure that the firms are doing the best practices that tend those leads that come into their cycle?
Yeah, well, I'd say marketing isn't a task. It's not a checkbox, check it, it's done, and move on. It's a function. It's a function that drives lots of things. From a continuum perspective, I think one of the first things is really define your target audience. Who's your ICP? Do you niche? Are you focused on first responders? Do you focus on airline pilots? We hear lots of that from lots of the firms we work with, but from there, start that process to figure out where those leads are going to come from. And I would suggest that your lead list isn't that new lead that came in that filled out a form, or that you bought from a paid lead provider, or somebody that hit you up on social. Very often, we talk to firms and we say, "Well, how many leads do you have?" And they'll say X thousand. And then we'll start to probe on that a little bit and say, well, do you have any databases? Do you have any Excel spreadsheets? Do you have, all these sorts of things? And they'll say, well, we have this thing, and maybe it's a larger firm that acquired another firm, within the past 12 months. And there was a lead list that they never really pulled over into their core CRM. And so we encourage firms to find all of those folks, put them through a tool like Catchlight to better identify that broader set of prospects that you have. There could be a prospect that you talked to that came into your ecosystem maybe 2 years ago, and maybe the time just wasn't right for them. They were starting to think, maybe they had a business and they were thinking about selling it, and they were at the beginning of that process. 2 years later, maybe they've sold the business and they've had a windfall and they need some help. So I would suggest to any firm that any name you've got, any lead that's engaged with you at any point in time, if they're a really warm lead, directly follow up. If they're maybe not a warm lead, they should be on a nurture campaign. You should continuously continue that conversation with anybody in your ecosystem. Make sure they understand who you are, how you support your clients, what your brand stands for, so that when the time comes, they know who to call.
So I'm curious, as fellow marketers, this is a question you just triggered again, Dan. So I don't know if you all experience this, but obviously there's a lot of marketers that use LinkedIn to sort of identify a prospect and maybe get you to connect, and they start hitting you. I've noticed in the last 6 months the whole life cycle of a drip campaign has gone very quickly where they'll hit me on a Monday, again on a Wednesday, on a Friday, are you still interested? And on Monday, this is my last shot. And then I'm closing you out as a possible lead, which is like mind-numbingly fast when I might not even knew the company existed or the service was an opportunity a week ago. And I've seen that accelerate not just in business services for agencies like mine or things like that, but across the board, even in my personal life. I'm curious to see, as you think about that lead nurturing process. I know financial services are just slower in general, but what would be like a cadence people should be thinking about where you're tending your customers? And I know Andrew, you at Dataline, you probably saw this too, and like what is that mindset that people, in terms of a time frame, that advisors should allow these things to gestate, whether it's lead generation, lead nurturing, or deployment of testimonials? What's a good life cycle for that?
Yeah, I mean, forever, right? I think, those annoying emails that we all get that, the 17th emails, are you still interested? And like, I was never interested, right? That are very, very aggressive, right? It's probably sort of a byproduct of the compensation at how a lot of these, companies work, and they just kind of churn through lists and let their BDRs go crazy. But I think the firms that do it well understand that at any given time, a very, very small percentage of your TAM is actually ready to buy, right? There might be a prospect who is perfect fit and even believes they're perfect fit for you, but they're in the middle of a move, or they've got screaming kids, or whatever it is. They're just not ready to kind of take the time and that mental load to like kind of transition to a new advisor or start this process. And so rather than trying to force them through that, you just want to make sure that you are there when they are ready and that they remember who you are. So I think instead of thinking through this like funnel that you have to force people through, once you determine, okay, this is not a hot lead, this is not someone ready to buy, but it is someone who fits our general profile, instead of how do you accelerate that, it's how do you stay top of mind, right? And so I think shifting that kind of outreach pattern from the very aggressive, are you sure you don't want a meeting next week, right? This is my last chance, to here's some information that we think is really helpful, and we're going to share it with you on a non-invasive cadence. And I always hear from advisors, right? There are some firms, or clients they end up with that they're like, yeah, I've been sending this guy emails for 6 years. And then they're finally ready. And I think, so having that patience and understanding, I mean, I see it on the, Dan, you probably see this too. I see it on the B2B side. I mean, we had a firm that just reached out that we've been talking to since before we launched. So for over 2 years now, who just reached out and said, hey, we're finally ready. We're going to start in Q1. And so I think having that patience and providing the right information, but shifting the communication strategy from kind of aggressive lead gen towards or aggressive closing towards information and staying top of mind, I think can be very valuable.
And Dan, how would you take that gestation question in terms of like what's a relevant time frame for advisors to let things work, whether it's the implementation of Catchlight or whether it's the actual lead follow-up sequence? What's a good mindset to have coming into that work?
Yeah, I think a couple things here, Joe. Number one, there must have been some research that suggested that the breakup email is the one that's really going to get them to respond. So maybe some of the stuff that you've been receiving is from firms that subscribe to the breakup email is you got to get to it fast. That's going to force response. The other thing I would say, and Andrew talked about this a little bit, but I don't think the purchase process is linear. We talk about a funnel, but I tend to think of it as a purchase pretzel. People are going through different cycles of their life, and there's no singular cycle that the world's going to go through and be prescriptively ready for paid advice in 3 months. I think that you could probably look at assets and look at life stage, look at age, look at a lot of different attributes of an individual, and you could maybe get a little bit more prescriptive. Is somebody ready to retire? Are they looking to sell a business? When is that going to happen? Those things could help you define what that time frame is. But like Andrew said, it could be 6 months, it could be 6 years, and I think it's really important to leverage that channel. If it's email, if it's social, whatever you're doing to reach your audience. If it's webinars, seminars, things like that. Whatever you're doing to communicate your message about who you are, what your firm stands for, and how you help others, and being able to demonstrate that through some of the tools that Andrew and his team put together. I think those are critical. So I wouldn't put a time frame to it. I'd put a process to it, and allow for engagement from your prospects through that process. That said, yeah, I think there's data out there from some firms that we work with that suggest once somebody has raised their hand, there's positive intent, and that they seek to close that business within 60, 90 days. If they have, if somebody's raised their hand and taken a meeting, we talked to a firm yesterday that said, once we get that meeting, we are likely to close. And so maybe it's what do I need to do, and what is that time frame? What does that process look like to get that meeting? And then once that meeting happens, there's a very clear next step, next step, next step plan delivered, things like that to drive to the close.
Well, I'm going to ask you both. Maybe this is too much of your secret sauce, so steer me away if you can't say this. But like Dan, I'll start with you. Like when you look at Catchlight and scoring some of the underlying data, are there any specific things that you see as strong symptoms or flags that maybe a prospect or someone in someone's database is more likely to be activated? Is there a job change, a life, like what is it, the things that get flagged by the AI or whatever to
Yeah.
tell an advisor maybe they should be prioritizing the conversation? Can you just give us one example that would give us a sense of direction there?
Well, that's the Catchlight score, Joe. That's the
Yeah.
that's the secret sauce. That's the core model that we built about 4 years ago. There are lots of different things that go into that, different weights and things like that. But if there is a life event, there's a windfall, there's a divorce or a death in the family. Those are sorts of some of the immediate triggers. But there's it's different weights. It's where are people at from an asset perspective? Did somebody change jobs? Did they get a raise? Did they get company stock? These are all triggers that are temporal. That it just happened, therefore I need to do something. But sort of goes back to the conversation we were just having about building that relationship, so that when that time comes, uh, it may not be able to be predicted, but when that time comes, are you the brand that built that relationship with that prospect, and you're the brand that they're going to call? But to your question, there are a number of different factors that weigh somebody's likelihood to seek paid advice. But it's sort of that's the secret sauce, part of the Catchlight score.
Got to try. Couldn't hurt
Yeah,
to ask.
don't
Andrew,
blame you.
yeah. So Andrew, one of the things I'm hearing, so actually, and we're on a panel last week in LA, and it came up. There's a couple of very progressive CMOs who were involved in the conversation that still hadn't pushed their firm over the finish line in terms of using testimonial platforms, whether it's yours or other ones. But the conversation I had with one of them afterwards, it brought up the idea of what do people most inject into their testimonials when they talk about, like, what are they talking about? The experiences? Are they pointing to a specific service? Like, what
Yeah.
gets drawn out in that customer testimonial?
Yeah, it's so interesting because we published actually a large study on Kits's website a year or so ago, where we scraped all the testimonials or Google reviews from financial advisors across the country. Because what we kept hearing was, oh, well, I'm afraid to ask them because what if I ask them on a day that the market's down? And what we sort of intuitively knew is that that's not really what people write about, because that's also not really why people hire a financial advisor. But sure enough, what we saw in the data was very, very clear, right? People, whether positive or negative, almost never write about performance results or fees. So number one, testimonials, Google reviews tend to be overwhelmingly positive, better than you see in other industries. I think the average we see on our platform is like a 4.9 star or something like that, a little above. But two, what people write about is not performance or fees. It is relationship based. It is how quickly does the advisor respond to me? Um, how do they make me feel? And one of the big themes we saw come up over and over again is they feel more like family than a financial advisor, right? It's things like, oh, they go to my kids' t-ball games, and they know everyone in our family, and they have this wonderful barbecue every year that everyone attends, and we get to know each other. And so it's all relationship based. And on the flip side, the angry ones, the negative ones, were also relationship based generally, right? It was, they don't answer my emails. They set up a generic portfolio and haven't responded in 18 months. So it really comes down to communication and the quality and responsiveness of that communication.
Yeah, well, it goes back to that fundamental number one rule of marketing communications: know your audience and speak their language, right? And
Yep.
so you think about that in terms of, one of the ideas that we jumped off of with a client recently. They got involved in the Google reviews and testimonial game, and they started crawling through those and finding things that clients were saying about them that were obviously positive, and building out content that spoke to that. So even one thing was, what to expect from your financial advisor, more of a generic, like, hey, if you're someone looking to hire someone, these are some of the basic things. And that performed beautifully in their digital marketing, because guess what? If you're thinking about hiring an advisor, you probably should know what at least the gold standard or the North Star might be in terms of the experience. And so I think these things can feed on each other, whether it's coming in from the lead side or coming in from what you're building with the reviews and testimonials, Andrew. I think, before we wrap up here, there's two things I want to get to. One, real quickly, is, we've seen testimonials hit the scene. We've seen the adoption of AI hit the scene. What else might you think would be a big player in the organic growth mix over the next couple of years from what you witnessed and where you sit in the industry? I don't know, Dan, if you have a thought on that. Is there anything you're watching or Catchlight seeing from its seat that you think might be a big influence in how firms market themselves?
I think it's leveraging the technology, Joe. Testimonials, data, insights, AI, CRM, workflows. How are you thinking about, as a firm, stitching all these pieces together? I think there's great new technology out there. There's AI note taking and consolidation, meeting prep, things like that. Um, I think the firms that are going to grow more so than others are those that are going to adopt this technology, but stitch it together in a way that they're thinking about that end user experience. And that end user is both the advisor, whoever's selling and whoever's servicing, but also the end client. How are they thinking about stitching these tools together to have this cohesive experience for both parties to come together, where the technology is that enabler of that relationship? That's really, we talked about these reviews from Andrew, and what he's seeing. Ultimately, these are about relationships. My advisor shows up to my kid's t-ball game. They feel like family. The contrary is they haven't responded in 18 months. These are relationships. It's fundamental to, I think, this business. And so how do you leverage the technology, piece it together from, I've got somebody that just filled out a form on my website, to, somebody that's been a client of mine for 10 years, and let the technology do a lot of the hard work, where the advisor can take a step back and really build that fundamental relationship with the client.
And Andrew, how would you answer that question? You think about what could be next.
Yeah, I think firms that figure out the right combination of outreach and content ecosystems to find the right individuals, bring them into their orbit, and then build trust in a way that gets them to take a meeting. I think you joked about the annoying breakup emails you get, and the combination, you get the LinkedIn and then 7 follow-up emails. And I think companies like kind of Zoom Info and the others have in a lot of ways kind of just killed B2B outreach. And now you're seeing, the kind of V2 of lead gen with the money and motion tools now coupled with automated outreach. And I think people in general are kind of tired of being barraged with very aggressive emails soliciting services. And I think so the companies that figure out, how do I find the prospects but meet them where they are? How do I make sure that they can discover me, that I can give them information that's intriguing and encourages them to stay engaged, but does so in a way that's not sort of aggressive and almost offensive.
So both of you in your notes gave me a nuggets, basically more or less saying that financial services is slower to adopt anything in the marketing realm. And, I'll reflect back on myself for a second. If you look back at the general objections that people might have about hiring Gregory FCA, in terms of why they might be slow to do it, the three areas always come up as, whether it's the cost of implementing, compliance, or the lack of marketing leadership to make best use of the investment, right? And I was actually talking to someone at this conference in LA, and they were saying that and they're in the world of wealth tech, and they feel the biggest stumbling block are some of the same exact things. So I'm providing a service, they're providing technology, and it's still the same thing. And so play along with me for a second. How would you rate those three factors in terms of a stumbling block, in terms of getting them to adopt either what you're doing or, generally speaking, just marketing tools in general? When you weigh compliance, marketing leadership, and budget, where do you think the typical advisor firm falls in terms of which ones are keeping them from embracing the new stuff?
I'll take a shot at that first. So, compliance is always a challenge, and I think it's dependent on the tool, the technology, and where and how it's going to be implemented. Is it something sort of front office? Is it back office? Where and how? So, I think it that sort of depends. I, and between the budget and the leadership, I think it's you establish that leadership. And that leadership is going to put programs in place. They're going to put budgets in place. They're going to ideally have AUM targets that they're responsible for from a marketing perspective. Bring in X number of leads, Y number of conversions, and so I think it's that leadership will define what that budget looks like. So. I would put compliance off the side and say, marketing leadership comes first, and then the budget will follow based on their plans.
And how would you address that, Andrew?
Yeah, I used to think it was compliance. I think compliance gets thrown under the bus a lot. I think a lot of firms kind of like if there's something they kind of want to do, but they don't have a strong champion, it's like, oh, well, compliance is in the way, so we can't. And more I've seen that if leadership really wants to get something done, they can usually work cooperatively with compliance in a way to make it work. And evolve towards the right solution. And I think I heard something the other day. Someone said, no one wakes up in the morning and says, I want to buy software today, right? Because there's any new piece of software, any new process, any new, marketing partner you work with, there's friction, right? There's inertia you have to overcome. And so I think finding a single person who is so passionate about this problem inside the company that says, I'm going to take on all the additional work that comes with it, right? It's not just budget, but I know I have my day job, and I'm going to have to do a lot more work to get everyone involved, to get everyone trained up on this. And I know that I'm going to be stuck being the one to spearhead this for an indefinite amount of time. And I think you have to find that person who is so troubled by this problem that they're willing to raise their hand and take on the extra work.
That's a good perspective. I think, one of the points I'll underline there is, from where I sit, across the industry, there's a lot of bright, capable marketing leaders. A lot of times they are one man and one woman teams. And I do think that's going to be a big obstacle, because even if they are empowered with some budget, their ability to implement is stifled because they don't have the arms and legs to put that out there. And I think that's going to be one of the big pushes for the industry, is to bring more marketing talent into the fold. Because again, I think you said no one wakes up in the morning wanting to, install new software or buy new tech in the morning. Just the same, I don't think there's many people who go to school to become publicists or marketers or things like that are dreaming about doing that work for an insurance company or a bank or a financial advisor, right? They're thinking of other things, Taylor Swift or the Yankees or some entity that's a little more jazzy and exciting for them at that point in life. And so the industry has that to conquer. And I think, from my perspective, I think that's one of the big things we'll see, is that there's going to be more and more of these firms that are above the fold from a AUM perspective will install and empower those marketing leaders. So the implementation of Testimonial IQ or Catchlight or other tools happens a little more seamlessly. So with that, this is the part of the podcast where I ask my guests for their parting shot, words of wisdom, ideas, advice for the market, people think about marketing in general, as it relates to what you do, or more broadly. Feel free to take a swipe at this in terms of what you'd want people to take away as they think about you, your world, and what you're bringing to the table from your firm's perspective. And Dan, we played this game on a panel we did recently, so you can go first, since you know what this is like.
Well, my answer on that panel was something about building a phishing app, Joe. But that the precursor to building the phishing app, the advice I'd shared was just try things. AI, different tools, try them. There's nothing ventured, nothing gained. There's some powerful technology out there, but first identify. If you're thinking about a purchase pretzel versus a funnel, where are those? Do you have gaps in that pretzel? Do you have spots where things are just slowing down? Try and identify that and seek technology. Seek conversations. I mean, if you want to call me, I'm happy to chat with anybody about different technology, about different purchase pretzels and things like that. But identify some tech and try it. There's a lot of great technology out there. It's not super expensive, not that hard to implement today. Try it. See where and how it can help you fix that gap in the process that you have. That's what I would say.
Awesome. Andrew, what's your shot?
Just talk to your clients about feedback, whether it's through us or just sending them an email or a text or whatever you prefer. Setting aside time at the end of the meeting. It's amazing to me how many firms we work with have been working with clients for decades sometimes and never had a formalized process to collect feedback. And a lot of the advisors, the first thing they said to us is, I didn't know how much my clients liked me, or I didn't know how much I've impacted their lives. And it really gives them an extra boost of motivation. But to a point you made earlier, Joe, for a lot of firms, they can surface themes of, well, I have this whole niche of clients, or I have this amazing benefit that people are getting working about us that I've never talked about or I've never marketed to. And I think it can unlock a lot of potential for growth and just understanding why your clients love working with you and why they've stuck with you as opposed to the other 100,000 options out there.
Well, those are both great pieces of advice, straightforward ideas that folks can build off of. So, Andrew and Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of Marketing Matchup. Once again, Andrew Johnson, founder of Testimonial IQ, and Dan Gilmartin, Chief Marketing Officer at Catchlight. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having us, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for listening to Marketing Matchup, a production of Gregory. If you like what you heard, please listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.